Hi, welcome to another dose of virtual vitamin Z. My name is Stephen, and I'm the curator of Humane Education for the Detroit Zoological Society. And the topic for today's lesson is Systems Thinking 2. Why does systems thinking matter? And to answer this question, I actually have another question that I want you all to think about for a little bit. And that question is, what could be the connection between a fast food meal and a beached whale? So think about that a little bit as I introduce today's terms. Today's terms include some review as well as some new terms. So the review terms are ecosystem, which refers to a place and the living and non-living beings or things in that place and the interconnections among them. And so last time we talked about the Yellowstone ecosystem and the wolves and vegetation and deer and other inhabitants of that place, of that ecosystem. And an ecosystem is an example of a system. And I'll define system characteristics, and systems thinking on the next slide. So as a review, a system is a whole composed of interconnected parts. So the Yellowstone ecosystem is a system because it's a whole composed of parts like wolves, deer, plants, sunlight, energy, things like that. But humans also have systems. For example, one human system is the family, and a family is a whole composed of individual parts, each individual member, and the relationships among them. And systems have several characteristics, and these include causality, interconnectedness, and emergence. And so causality refers to cause and effect relationships. So for example, thinking back to Yellowstone, the reintroduction of wolves immediately caused changes in the deer population. Some of the deer were eaten by the wolves, other deer changed their behaviors because the wolves were present. But it didn't just have that immediate effect, it also had effects in this chain of effects. And that's what interconnectedness refers to. It refers to a chain of cause and effect, so that the wolves' reintroduction didn't just affect the deer, but indirectly affected the whole ecosystem, including the rivers and the shape of the rivers. And emergence refers to this idea that when a system is functioning, there are qualities or characteristics of that system that are not qualities or characteristics of any individual part. And so we can think of this as the idea that 1 + 1 can actually equal 3, or think of it by saying that a system is greater than the sum of its individual parts. And systems thinking is the ability to recognize systems and their characteristics in the world around us. So to illustrate a system, I showed you a game called the system game, in which I had 3 colleagues, and what they had to do was try to stand between the other 2 while maintaining a physical distance of 6 feet. And as you can see, when one moved, everybody else had to move too. And that's a great example of this interconnectedness of a system. And we can create a map of this system by choosing part A, part B, and part C, and then also thinking of the relationships among them and the relationship as a whole in that system. And the only difference between this map and other maps is that most systems we live in have more than 3 parts, so they're more complicated, but the same principles apply. So before we go on to mapping systems, let's think about why systems thinking matters. Well, it matters because, as we've seen from looking at these systems, our actions have interconnected, distant, and long-term consequences. So for example, our actions have interconnected consequences. Something that I do might end up affecting something, having an effect that in turn is the cause of another effect that is the cause of another effect. And so there's this, this interconnectedness where I do one thing and down the chain something else happens that I might not know of. And one reason I might not know of that is because these effects can be very distant. Something I do here can have an effect very far away from me through that chain of effects. They can also be very long-term. Something I do today could have effects days, weeks, months, even years from now. And because we know that about our actions, Systems thinking can help us understand these because the reason our actions have those consequences is that we live in systems. And therefore, systems thinking helps us do the most good and least harm for people, animals, and nature, because it helps us understand the consequences of those actions. And as humane individuals, we want to make sure that we're doing the most good and least harm. So that leads me to the answer to this question. And one possible connection between a fast food meal and a beached whale is plastic. A lot of times fast food meals involve plastic, like the lid of a soda or the straw of a soda. And this plastic can travel through natural systems, human and natural systems. Maybe it doesn't get disposed of properly, or maybe it goes to a landfill, and that landfill experiences some runoff, and the plastic travels into the watershed, ends up in an ocean, where an animal like a whale, this is a whale shark, not a whale, but where an animal like a whale could consume that plastic inadvertently. And over time, that plastic can build up in a whale's stomach to the point that it makes the whale sick, unable to swim, and could cause the whale to die. And people have actually found lots of plastic in the stomachs of beached whales. And so I knew that because I've been thinking about some of these issues for a while. But if I didn't know that, one tool I could use to find that connection is creating a system map of the fast food whale system. And this is an example of that. In a moment, I'll show you how to make your own. But as you can see, it shows these interconnections that leads from fast food meal to beached whale. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to create a system map. And by doing this activity, we'll increase our knowledge about systems, as well as strengthen our systems thinking. And the supplies we'll need are just a piece of paper and then colored pencils or pens, just anything that kind of 3 different colors of writing implements. And so here are the steps. I'll show them to you, then I'll show you a demonstration. First step is to choose a system, or it could be just a topic, and then write it in the center of a piece of paper. And then around that system, write as many other words related to it as you can. And you can write as many words as you can. Some might not end up being connected, but anything that comes to mind. And then in a different color, draw arrows connecting the related words. And this is to start building that chain of connections. And then once you feel like you've included all the arrows, review your completed map, and in a different color, identify at least one insight you can draw from it. And I'll show you that in a moment. And then as an extension, you can choose a second system and try to connect them. And that's what I did with the fast food meal and the beached whale. So here we go. I chose, again, in this case, I guess it's not really a system, it's just a topic, but fast food meal. And then I wrote different words that I associated with fast food meal, and then words that I associated with those words. So hamburger, French fries, soda. Sodas have a cup, straw, lid. Lid's made of plastic. Plastic can be recycled. It can go to a landfill, etc. And then I started drawing in connections and labeling those connections. So for example, looking up here, I said, well, a hamburger is made of meat. Meat's produced through factory farming. Factory farming affects cows. Cows produce methane. Methane contributes to climate change. So that was another direction that this went. And then I circled, I thought climate change was really important. It was an interesting way of thinking that a fast food meal can affect climate change. So I circled that as one insight. And then I did the same thing with beached whale. And I was able eventually to connect these two. And one possible connection has to do with possibly ocean temperatures. But another one down here, as you can see, is that plastics, if they're not recycled, can go to a landfill or just be littered. That can lead, through runoff, can enter the watershed, and the water goes to the ocean, and the beached whale may consume the plastic in the water in the ocean. So that's how you can create a map like that. And what I want to end on, because creating that map is great and it's an important step, but there are more immediate actions we can take to help whales in this case by reducing our plastic use. And by taking this action, we'll increase our sense of responsibility for other animals in the environment and also help animals in the environment. And we don't need any supplies for this one. And right now especially, it might seem very daunting and challenging to reduce our plastic use. as you know, certain businesses and restaurants and places like that don't allow us to bring in reusable bags or reusable containers or cups or things like that. But a couple of tips to think about. One is to be creative. For example, from my own personal experience, there are some local coffee shops that I really like, and I want to support them right now. And so I thought, well, how can they won't let me use a reusable mug, so how can I continue supporting them? Well, one thing I can do is I can buy coffee beans from them and then brew them at home in a reusable mug. So thinking a little bit creatively. Another tip is to focus on what is within our control. So some places might say you can't use your reusable bag or your reusable container or something like that, but there's still ways that we can reduce plastic use. For example, as we use soap, we can think about buying liquid soap in bulk. And then rather than every time we go through a single-use dispenser, replacing the dispenser, we can buy one dispenser and then refill it with the larger container of liquid soap we bought in bulk. So those are just a couple of examples on being creative and focusing on what's within our control. And that leads me back to the work we do at the Detroit Zoological Society, where through the Berman Academy for Humane Education, we help people help animals. And I hope you're continuing to see how systems thinking and systems mapping can help you help animals. And I also hope that those 2 tips about reducing plastic use were useful to you. So thanks so much for tuning in. If you're interested in more virtual vitamin Z, be sure to check out our website at detroitzoo.org, click on the education tab, and then click on the link for virtual vitamin Z. Until then, stay safe and have a great day. Bye.